We left off in our last lesson in Daniel chapter 9, verses 26 and 27. We were detailing that Daniel's prophecies work out in wonderful and undisputable fashion. Verses 26 and 27 of Daniel chapter 9 mention that Messiah will die, the second temple will be destroyed, and it was, in 70 A.D. Israel will be restored, and they were restored as a nation in 1948. The temple will be rebuilt, the third temple, and we'll be talking much more about that. We've talked about that a lot already. That's the coming temple where the Antichrist will move into and announce that he is God. So that temple is not built yet. The Antichrist will confirm a covenant or treaty. The temple will be desecrated, that third temple, by the Antichrist moving into it. And the Jews will be persecuted. We've already discussed that some of these prophecies have already been fulfilled. Jesus was crucified. He was cut off in AD 33. The second temple was destroyed, as I mentioned, in AD 70. And Israel, as I also mentioned, was restored in 1948 as a nation. The balance of the prophecies are yet to be completed. In verse 27, Daniel says, in the middle of the seven, he, the Antichrist, will put an end to sacrifice and offering. That is when the Antichrist will move into the temple, the third temple that has yet to be built, 3.5 years into the tribulation, the 7-year tribulation, where he will announce he's God. The sacrificial systems for the Jews was stopped in AD 70 when the second temple was destroyed. As Jews know that animal sacrifices can only be performed within the context of a fully outfitted temple in its rightful place in the city of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, they must wait until that time. But they have been practicing. Does a temple stand in Jerusalem now? No, it does not. What must be in place before a temple in Jerusalem can be built again? The Jews must be back in the land, 1948, and also they must be in control of the Temple Mount itself. And technically, they are. They won back the Temple Mount in the Six-Day War in 1967. And there were a lot of miracles tied to that, too. I've discussed them before in other lessons in this series, in these podcasts. But the Six-Day War in 1967 yielded the Temple Mount back into the hands of the Jews. This regaining of the Temple Mount was 2,000 years in the making. So what is the state of this most sacred piece of real estate now? Well, a day after the Jews won the Six-Day War, then General Moshe Dayan, in order to not provoke yet another Arab invasion, gave back control and administration to the Arabs. However, the nation of Israel still owns the entire site. So what does this all mean? The 70th week of years has not yet begun, but it's about to. From the time Messiah is cut off until this very minute you're hearing this, God has built in a truce, or a pause, if you will. So what is this truce? And what is its common name? And why is it important, especially to you and me right now? Well, this truce is the dispensation of grace, or more commonly known as the church age. Why did God build in this period of grace? When did it start? When will it end? And how? These are good questions, and we'll get to those. Our endeavor to parse the book of Daniel has been quite a ride so far, and I think one of the most intense parts was our journey through the super condensed content stuffed into just the last 4 verses that we covered in chapter 9. So now we're going to enter chapter 10, so please take your Bibles and get ready in chapter 10. In the first year of Darius, Daniel had a vision, and Gabriel told him about the 70 weeks. This, of course, was chapter 9. As we begin chapter 10, it is the 3rd year of King Cyrus, about 4 years since the events of chapter 9. Just to give you a little timeline, Daniel again prays deeply and fasts, and then is granted yet another vision where he is supernaturally visited. Let's read Daniel chapter 10, verses 1 through 9. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a revelation was given to Daniel, who was called Belshazzar. Its message was true, and it concerned a great war. The understanding of the message came to him in a vision. At that time, I, Daniel, mourned for 3 weeks. I ate no choice food, no meat or wine touched my lips, and I used no lotions at all until the 3 weeks were over. Daniel chapter 10, verse 4. On the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, the Tigris, I looked up, and there before me was a man dressed in linen, with a belt of the finest gold around his waist. His body was like chrysolite, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and his voice like the sound of a multitude. Verse 7. I, Daniel, was the only one who saw the vision. The men with me did not see it. But such terror overwhelmed them that they fled and hid themselves. This was so powerful an intervention or an interloping of God to talk to Daniel, or this angel, that they heard it. They heard something and they fled. So I was left alone, gazing at this great vision. I had no strength left. My face turned deathly pale, and I was helpless. Then I heard him speaking, and as I listened to him, I fell into a deep sleep, my face to the ground. Now let's compare Daniel's encounter here with the encounter in chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9, and I'll just read this. Daniel chapter 9, verses 22 through 23. Thinking about what we just read about his encounter with his messenger now in chapter 10, let's look for the similarities here. Daniel chapter 9, verse 20. While I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people, Israel, and making my request to the Lord my God for his holy hill, while I was still in prayer, Gabriel, the man I had seen in the earlier vision, came to me in swift flight about the time of the evening sacrifice. He instructed me and said to me, Daniel, I have now come to give you insight and understanding. As soon as you began to pray, an answer was given, which I have come to tell you. For you are highly esteemed. Therefore, consider the message and understand the vision. So Daniel knows from prior experience that this is the angel Gabriel. It seems as though Daniel is getting used to this sort of thing, but he's still taken aback by all of it too. So let's take a look at his encounter in chapter 10. Let's read Daniel chapter 10, verses 4 through 12. On the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great Tigris river, I looked up, and there before me was a man dressed in linen, with a belt of the finest gold around his waist. His body was like chrysolite. I know we're reading this again, but I want you to understand and remember the scenario here. His body was like chrysolite, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze. Now listen to this. And his voice like the sound of a multitude. And one of my favorite translations, the Amplified Version, puts it this way. It was of the sound of people or the roaring sea. I, Daniel, was the only one who saw the vision. The men with me did not see it, but such terror overwhelmed them that they had fled and hid themselves. So they may have heard this sound as a roaring sea. They may have thought it was rolling thunder. Who knows? So I was left alone, gazing at this great vision, and I had no strength left. My face turned deathly pale, and I was helpless. Then I heard him speaking, and as I listened to him, I fell into a deep sleep, my face to the ground. A hand touched me and sent me trembling on my hands and knees. He said, Daniel, you are highly esteemed. Consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you, and stand up. For I have now been sent to you. And when he said this to me, I stood up trembling. Then he continued, Do not be afraid, Daniel. Note that Daniel trembles in fear during this encounter like never before in any of his other encounters. Such is the power of this particular presence, of this messenger, in this particular instance. Please turn to Revelation chapter 11, verses 10 through 18. We are going to read a special supernatural encounter that John experienced while on the Isle of Patmos. On the Lord's day, I was in the Spirit, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet, which said, Write on a scroll what you see and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me, and when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And among the lampstands was someone like a son of man, dressed in a robe reaching down to his feet, and with a golden sash around his chest. Verse 14. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like blazing fire. His feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. That's quite a bit like what Daniel, in the Amplified version of the Bible, is said to have heard. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp, double-edged sword. His face was like the sun, shining in all its brilliance. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. Then he placed his right hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid." Isn't this what also this messenger said to Daniel? "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last," capital F and capital L. So we know definitely who is speaking to John here. "I am the living one," capital L, capital O. "I was dead, and behold, I am alive forever and ever. And I hold the keys of death and Hades." Isn't that Jesus? Detailing some of his main attributes. So I just want to bring you here to show you the similarities of this encounter with this particular messenger in Daniel chapter 10, and the similarities of the same messenger, which we know is Jesus Christ, in Revelation. So, do the supernatural encounters that Daniel and John had have any similarities? Do you see any? In Revelation chapter 1 and verse 13, John explicitly states that the being he saw was like a son of man. And he should know because, unlike Daniel, John knew the Son of Man personally. The point in making the comparison between Daniel's and John's special visitations is to bring out the fact that many theologians believe that Daniel's encounter in chapter 10 was none other than the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ. And with this evidence I just presented you, I also believe the same thing. It's a very special visitation who had some very special things to say to Daniel. And again, the similarities with his appearance to Daniel in those days is pretty much the same as his post-resurrection appearance to John. However, if you look again at Daniel's description, the visitor's body was like chrysolite. The King James Version puts this as beryl. The beryl is the ore from which the metal beryllium is refined and possesses a beautiful bluish color. Also, in verse 5, we are told that this being was dressed in linen and not a robe, as John sees in his vision. So what do you think? Did Daniel have another visit from the angel Gabriel or from Jesus himself? Well, I'll leave that for you to decide because we don't know for sure. I told you what I think and I told you what other people think. One thing to continue to study about. Nevertheless, Daniel, like John, was brought to his knees during this spectacular and powerful visit. Continuing in Daniel chapter 10, verses 12 through 14. Then he continued, this messenger, probably Jesus Christ, "Do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come." So let's stop and ponder this and parse it a little bit, just for a moment. When are we told Daniel's vision takes place? Hint. It's somewhere in chapter 10 and verse 1. And you can find out, if you look there, that it's in the 3rd year of King Cyrus of Persia. Well, Cyrus was the king of Persia, of course, at that time. How is it possible for a mere human, which Cyrus definitely was, to hinder any supernatural being from doing anything? It is impossible. So, who could it be that had the power to hinder Daniel's visitor? to where it took the angel Michael to assist to free up the heavenly messenger so that he could get to Daniel. Well, today, modern-day Persia is called Iran. Islam has a god whose name is Allah. Iran and the worshippers of this Allah are hell-bent on the destruction of God's people, mainly the Jews, as you probably are aware, but also Christians. And Satan is now, as Paul puts it in Ephesians and John puts it in his book, and I'll read from the King James Version, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2, "Where in time past you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air," Satan, "the spirit that now works in the children of disobedience." And then in John chapter 12, verse 31, "Now is the time for judgment on this world. Now the prince of this world," Satan, "will be driven out." We are told in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12, and I'll read that from the Amplified Version, "For we are not wrestling with flesh and blood." You see where I'm going with this. Contending only with physical opponents, but against the despotisms, against the powers, against the master spirits who are the world rulers of this present darkness. Did you hear that? The master spirits who are, right now, the actual world rulers of this present darkness, against the spirit forces of wickedness in the heavenly supernatural sphere. The kings of this world are kings by title only. In reality, they, these human kings, including Cyrus back in that day, are pawns of the prince of this world and his hierarchy until the day he is driven out for good. Behind the earthly political scene is a higher spiritual political scene working. And you got to remember that, and if you know that, and I think most of you listening do by now, especially where we are right now, seeing all of this political upheaval and so forth, and how everything's politically motivated, and there is a hierarchy, certainly, and there is a plan that's being worked out by all of them, one side and the other. Politicians are pawns in the game of spiritual warfare. So let's review Daniel chapter 10, verses 12 through 14, now that we've discussed this. Daniel chapter 10, verse 12. "Then he continued, 'Do not be afraid, Daniel, since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God,'" you see those two conditions there, "your words were heard," or your prayers were heard. We need to be doing the same thing. "And I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian," modern day Iran, "the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, because I was detained there by the king of Persia." That's the king, the spiritual king, the angelic fallen angel king, or the real king over the physical human king of Persia at that time. The kings of this world are kings by title only. In reality, they are pawns of the prince of this world and his hierarchy until the day he's driven out for good. I just had to repeat that because we need to understand that. The focal point is what Daniel heard from Gabriel before. And here's verse 14. "Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people, for the vision concerns a time yet to come." So we see that this messenger's main focus is to come after explaining what it took for him to get there to Daniel, and in response to Daniel's prayer, because he had wanted to gain understanding. He wanted to know the truth, and he wanted to understand what the future held in truth and in God's plan for him and his people, and he humbled himself. And that's what we're doing here. "Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come." In this particular revelation, Daniel didn't just have a vision for a dream. He was confronted in real life by this heavenly visitor. Again, we can guess if it's Gabriel or Jesus himself as the resurrected Jesus or the pre-incarnate Word. We don't know, because Jesus can travel time, I'm sure. So was it the pre-incarnate Jesus, or was it the resurrected Jesus in his resurrected body going back in time? Because he certainly was in his resurrected body when he appeared to John at the time of the book of Revelation, which is around AD 90. many years after he had died on the cross and was resurrected. Remember, this required Michael's assistance and was probably going back to continue battling alongside Michael. Well, if this is the pre-incarnate Jesus, we know that he himself was a battler, at least in the Old Testament, helping his good angels, if you will, the main angels, fighting these things. So let's review what the visitor said to Daniel during this time. Daniel chapter 10, verse 14 says, "Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come," as far as Daniel's point of view was at his time. Something to ponder as we go along here. Even though Daniel's prayer was answered immediately, we are told in verse 13 that he was made to wait 21 days. Remember that Daniel's chapter 10 experience occurs only about 4 years after the revelation of the 70 weeks to him by Gabriel in chapter 9. So think of those things, especially if you or I are made to wait for anything. At least Daniel got an explanation, but it took 21 days to get that explanation, and then he was granted his prayer. Well, you may be granted your prayer. It may take 1 day or 10 days or 21 days or 21 years. And you may never understand the delay, but you just understand that sometimes there is a delay, and it's always for good reason. Always for good reason in God's economy. So you recall in chapter 9 that after much prayer, almost the entire chapter was this prayer, by the way, Gabriel visits Daniel and explains in verse 24, so Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, that's 1, to put an end to sin, that's 2, to atone for wickedness, that's 3, to bring in everlasting righteousness, that's 4, and finally, to seal up vision and prophecy, to finish it, and to finally anoint the most holy, when Jesus Christ comes on the throne of David in the millennium. And that will complete the Davidic covenant, where we know that Jesus, through the line of Judah, has always been prophesied to be the final king on the throne of David, and that again will be in the 7,000 year, the millennium, when he moves into the fourth temple. After the third temple is destroyed, you may remember in the book of Ezekiel, it does talk very plainly about this fourth temple, which is very different from the other 3. You should go back to the study in Ezekiel to learn more about that. It's fascinating. But this is the temple that will be built at the time Jesus comes back, and he himself will rule and reign physically from this temple during the millennium. And you and I, as in Christ, will be ruling and reigning with him for 1,000 years in the world then, as he brings it back to an Edenic state. And then the rest, as they say, is future history. The point. The 77s, we just read them, to finish transgression, put an end to sin, atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint, finally, anoint the most holy on the Davidic throne, the last king on the Davidic throne, the second Adam taking back and having Eden the way it should be, if he didn't fail, right? The point. 77s or weeks of years is the time frame to complete all of these events in this dispensation of time. This time frame is the sum total and ends all sin and brings in Jesus Christ with the government upon his shoulders for eternity. Do not underestimate the full import of that little verse, Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. There's a lot of weight in that little verse we just read. You will remember that there is a gap in these 70 weeks that Daniel didn't know about. We must talk about that. 69 of these weeks of years pass from King Artaxerxes' decree to rebuild Jerusalem after the captivity, after they were let back in the time of Cyrus to go rebuild the city and the temple, until Messiah is cut off and has nothing, which we know is when Jesus Christ is cut off on the cross, but not for himself, and has nothing because the Jews did not come to him. But there is a pause. That's why it's the 70 weeks of Daniel, but we see 69 weeks. And there is a parenthesis or a pause. I like to call it a parenthesis. What is that pause? It's the church age. It's the church age. It's the time when Messiah is cut off, and we know that the church age starts at that point, officially on Pentecost, but it does start at that point. And then there is a 2,000-year timeline for the church age, the age of grace. And when that 2,000 years comes and goes, the church age is done and we move into the millennium, after the tribulation, of course. So how long is this pause to be? Well, it should be 2,000 years. Could it be that Daniel's 21-day prayer is indicative of 21 centuries of the church age? Just a thought I had when I was putting this study together. Could it be? We know it's about 2,000 years. Could it be that Daniel's 21-day prayer is indicative of 21 centuries? I don't know, but it's something to think about. Since Jesus was cut off, the gospel has been preached, and the church has been waiting for and anticipating a response to her prayers. We've been waiting to go home. We've been waiting for the gospel to be preached to all the ends of the world, and then the end shall come. We've been waiting for 2,000 years. You and I just happen to be in the generation that will see that time come. So, I ask you, what is your single most important prayer today? I know what mine is, and that is to be taken home in the rapture. I would rather go home in the rapture before I have to die and be taken home, but then I have to wait for my resurrected body. But I'd rather not die first. You probably feel the same way. When the church age is complete, what follows? We know that the follows directly is the tribulation. But I want to caution you here. It will make you think of something here. There is nothing in Scripture that gives an exact timeline of when the rapture takes place, that the tribulation will immediately start like the next day. It's probably not going to happen that way. Where we are in history right now and seeing the way the world is right now and how prophecy is rolling out so quickly and distinctly and wonderfully, we know we are that last generation. But we don't know exactly when the rapture is going to happen, and we can talk about that. But the key is to think about this. There is plenty that has to happen prophetically between now and the end of the tribulation. Probably there's a lot that's going to happen between now and the rapture of the church. There's going to have to be an explanation for it, and then there's going to have to be a healing, because there's going to be an upheaval around the whole world. I believe when the rapture of the church happens, it's really more the resurrection of the dead in Christ, that there are going to be earthquakes all over the earth, and there's going to be a lot of destruction. That resurrection power you see in biblical history, there's earthquakes surrounding resurrection power. That's how powerful it is. It's physical power that causes the earthquakes. And if it happens that way, there's going to be a lot of explaining that's going to have to be done after the world is disabled, pretty much, for at least a few weeks, a month. Many people will die. But the world will come back online, and someone will have an answer. Someone will know what happened to those evil people that were taken, but the ones that are left are the good people, and that's what's going to bring in the new religion and the Antichrist religion. And then you're going to have the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, which is going to be the healing of the planet, the healing of the people, the healing of the nations. The peace covenant is going to be ratified and strengthened, whatever is there at that time. And we know it's already started with Donald Trump and Jared Kushner's peace plan. We know that right now. So that's going to be part of this when the Antichrist comes and solidifies all of this into the one that is going to be a 7-year peace plan. So just some things to think about. When the church age is complete, what follows? Well, the tribulation, which is the resuming of the clock. This parenthetical time, the clock stops at the 69th week when Messiah is cut off, but not for himself. The pause is the 2,000 years, which Daniel saw the gap, but he didn't know what that was. So when the church is gone, we know that the clock has to start again, because now God's focus will be solely on Israel, to pick up, so to speak, where he left off, to make an end of sin, right? To do all those things we just read in Daniel chapter 9:24. That's when it will start. The close of the pause and the 70th week commences. That's the point. Pause and calmly think of that. If you look at history, and now even more than ever, current events, where does the bulk of evil political and religious activity occur? Where, right now, in the world? Where does the bulk of evil political and religious activity occur? The Middle East, India, and Asia. Modern day Israel is the only bastion of light, albeit secular right now. They're a reconstituted nation in blindness, right, since 1948. But they are a light in that whole region. And before Israel was restored back in 1948, that land was just another part of the Arab Muslim region. As a matter of fact, you know, because again, if you listen to these podcasts prior to now, that land was made desolate by God. It didn't start raining there again for 2,000 years until in the 1800s. And that's when the Jews started coming back in, when God was preparing that land for the Jews. And then finally, the Balfour Declaration, and you've learned these things before, so I won't go over them now. But they were allowed to have a Jewish homeland, and World War II prepared a people for that land. But I don't want to digress too much. Modern day Israel is the only bastion of light there. So remember that. Let's continue now in Daniel chapter 10, verses 16 through 19. Then one who looked like a man touched my lips, and I opened my mouth and began to speak. I said to the one standing before me, I am overcome with anguish because of the vision, my Lord, and I am helpless. How can I, your servant, talk with you, my Lord? My strength is gone, and I can hardly breathe. Verse 18. Again, the one who looked like a man touched me and gave me strength. Do not be afraid, O man highly esteemed, he said. Now it's one man talking to another. Well, Jesus came as fully human, right? So could this be the post-resurrected Jesus who already had come as a man traveling back in time? That's why he looked like a man? I don't know. It's open for thought. It's certainly open for debate, but it's good food for thought to think about how God does things. It is amazing. He says, do not be afraid, O man highly esteemed, he said, and he equates himself to Daniel as a man, right? Peace, be strong now. Be strong. When he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, speak, my Lord, since you have given me strength. So he said, do you know why I have come to you? It's a good question. Soon I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. He's going back there. Well, he left Michael fighting him, but he's going back. And when I go, the prince of Greece shall come. Think back to Nebuchadnezzar's statue. Now the next order of the Gentile world governments will come in. We see that after his special mission to Daniel, this being will have to return to the fight in Persia against one of Satan's emissaries or higher rank and power, noted in verse 13 as the prince of the kingdom of Persia. And then Greece comes into the picture. Now, you remember the order of the Gentile world governments in Nebuchadnezzar's statues, like I was just saying. Babylon, and we move down to Medo-Persia, which is timeline we're talking about right here. And then comes Greece, and then Rome, and that's when Jesus came physically to this earth during the Roman period. And then we have the church age, and then we have the resurrected or the revived Roman Empire at the feet of the statue. I hope all of this is coming together for you. It really does make sense as when you look at it in this timeline that he gave us. It's absolutely flawless, and it's wonderful that we can understand this. It's interesting that this being says that after he fights in Persia, his next encounter will be the kingdom of Greece, right on schedule. The implication is that the fight will go on, even until the end of the age. Continuing in verse 21. But first, I will tell you what is written in the book of truth. No one supports me against them except Michael, your prince. That's interesting. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it's stated here for a reason. And in the first year of Darius the Mede, I took my stand to support and protect him. So what is the angel Michael's assignment? Do you know what that is? Well, you should have heard it before. He is the protector of Israel, the supernatural protector of Israel. That is his main assignment, and that's what he's done. And I believe he still continues to do in that capacity to this day, now that we are in the time of the coming revived Roman Empire and the merging of miry clay and iron. If you look at Daniel chapter 11, verse 1, which we just read, it seems that at a point 4 years prior, Gabriel stood with Michael to assist and ready him for the battles in Persia and beyond. There seems to be a reciprocal relationship of assistance between them. Gabriel and or Jesus Christ. Think about it. An interesting point is that the chapter 9 revelation to Daniel occurred the 70 weeks of Daniel timeline in that same year. Let's move to chapter 11 and verse 2. Daniel chapter 11 verse 2. Now then, I tell you the truth. 3 more kings will appear in Persia, and then a 4th, who will be far richer than all the others. When he has gained power by his wealth, he will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece. Chapter 10 sets the stage to prepare Daniel for more revelation of the critical truth about the future of Israel that involves Persia and the coming kingdom of Greece. Chapter 11 deals with the rise of the Antichrist, which we saw already in chapters 8 and 9 of Daniel. We discussed this earlier, but it seems that chapters 8, 9, and 11 try to show us the lineage of the Antichrist. So let's read chapter 9, verses 25 through 26. Know and understand this. From the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Anointed One, capital A, capital O, until the Messiah, the ruler, that's right, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble. After 62 sevens, the Anointed One will be cut off and will have nothing. The people of the ruler who will come, will destroy the city and the sanctuary. So if you look at this timeline in a linear fashion, we see that the ruler who will come is after Messiah is cut off and resurrected and in heaven. So when was Messiah cut off? AD 33. When was the second temple destroyed after Messiah? AD 70, just like he had prophesied. And by whom? The people of the prince that shall come. Well, that would be Vespasian and his son Titus, the Romans. So we know that the Antichrist will be of Roman lineage, to include all of the royal bloodline of Europe. Think of that. And bloodline is very important in those governments there, in the European governments. However, we also know that he comes out of Alexander the Great. There's Grecian lineage here too, during the Hellenization of the world. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8, verses 19 through 25. And he said, I am going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. The 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between his eyes is the first king. The 4 horns that replaced the one that was broken off, Alexander the Great, represents the 4 kingdoms that will emerge from his nation but will not have the same power. These 4 generals that you learned about in previous podcasts that sprung from Alexander's death. Daniel chapter 8 and verse 23. In the latter part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, sounds like now, huh? Anyway, rebels have become completely wicked, a stern-faced king, a master of intrigue will arise. By the way, that's in the time when the rebels have become completely wicked. Just saying. Seems like now, doesn't it? Can they get any more wicked? But anyway, at that time, a stern-faced king, a master of intrigue will arise. This is a very unique person, the most unique person in history other than Christ himself and possibly Solomon. Think about it. Verse 24, he will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy the mighty men with the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper, and he will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, peace and safety, right? He will destroy many and take his stand against the prince of princes. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. When they feel secure, peace and safety, peace plan, peace and safety, he will destroy many and take his stand against the prince, capital P, of princes. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. That's right. How do we put all of this together? This is the message given to Daniel in chapter 11. Chapter 11 primarily deals with Syria and Egypt, until finally we see this vile person stand up and take his place as the coming Antichrist, the final Antichrist. Let's read chapter 11, verses 2 through 4. Now then I tell you the truth. 3 more kings will appear in Persia. The current setting is in the 3rd year of Cyrus. And then a 4th, who will be far richer than all the others. When he has gained power by his wealth, he will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece. So here's those 3 kings who will rule Persia, and this is after Cyrus dies. So Cyrus passes away in 529 BC. Ptolemy, given power over North Africa, all of Egypt, Libya, Ethiopia, and on into the Straits of Gibraltar. These are the generals that are coming out of the kingdom that Alexander leaves because he dies. Note that Daniel chapter 8 and verse 9 says that Seleucus is the little horn to the south and to the east and toward the beautiful land. Let's read Daniel chapter 8 and verse 9. Out of one of them came another horn, which started small, but grew in power to the south and to the east and toward the beautiful land. Capital B, capital L. That's obviously Israel. It grew until it reached the host of the heavens, and it threw some of the starry host down to the earth and trampled on them. It set itself up to be as great as the prince of the hosts, capital P. It took away the daily sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was brought low. Verse 12. Because of the rebellion, the host of the saints and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. The original Assyrian was Seleucus. All of his dynastic successors controlled the land of Assyria. Out of this Assyrian dynasty came Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who in 168 BC overthrew the temple, profaned it with various statues, including, and most prominently, the statue of Zeus, which is Satan, by the way. And then he sacrificed one of the most unclean animals that God had mentioned in his laws to Israel. He sacrificed a sow and profaned the altar in the temple with its blood. Antiochus IV Epiphanes wanted to be the new God of the universe. And where better to accomplish that than at the Holy Temple in Jerusalem? So let's review. Daniel chapter 10 and verse 20. So he said, Do you know why I have come to you? Soon I will return to fight against the prince of Persia, and when I go, the prince of Greece shall come. But first I will tell you what is written in the book of the truth. No one supports me against them except Michael, your prince, and in the 1st year of Darius the Mede I took my stand to support and protect him. Daniel chapter 11 verse 2. Now then I tell you the truth. 3 more kings will appear in Persia, and then a 4th, who will be far richer than all the others. When he has gained power by his wealth, he will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king will appear, who will rule with great power and do as he pleases. After stirring up everyone against the kingdom of Greece, what's the next kingdom that has to come? Rome. After he has appeared, his empire will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 winds of heaven. It will not go to his descendants, nor will it have the power he exercised, because his empire will be uprooted and given to others. There is a point that needs stressing here. It seems strongly that this chapter is written specifically to the Jews, in that as they pass down their history from the very early days of Abraham, or Abram, all the way through until the current time, they will have been and will be reading the book of Daniel, and specifically Daniel chapter 11. They will have secular sources of Jewish history, such as one that we've used during our study time and time again, Flavius Josephus' writings. Specifically, the Antiquity of the Jews. where Book 11 covers the period from the death of Alexander the Great to the death of Judas Maccabeus, who recovered the city and the temple from Antiochus's siege and destruction. They will know the history of Alexander the Great and his kingdom segue into the hand of the most prominent generals, Seleucus or Seleucus. Some people say Seleucus, it's Seleucus, I guess, and Ptolemy. The key point for the Jews studying prophecy will apply their history to it and see that these two generals battled each other across the Holy Land, the Seleucids to the north and the Ptolemies to the south, until the Ptolemies faded away, leaving the Seleucids. The Seleucids' final fading away, when the smoke cleared, one man was left standing tall and prominent in the Jewish history and in Scripture. Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the very foretype of the soon-to-come, right now, and yet-to-come counterpart, the real Antichrist. I think we're going to stop here now. We'll continue next time. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a lot to think about, and especially in reflection of this year, which happens to be 2020. It is now September of 2020, and things are shaping up prophetically as I have never personally seen in the about 30 years or so that I have been watching them, specifically, most intently, the last 20 years. So keep your feet on the ground and keep looking up. Our Lord is about to take us home. If you are not saved, or you are not sure that you are Christian, you have to repent and turn to Jesus now. You have to make up your mind now, because the time is short. And I truly believe the rapture is coming very, very soon. Anyway, may God bless you and keep you until the next time we meet.